Are you thinking of owning your dream homes? EJ Investment is here for you. Secure our quality bungalows with 2, 3, or 4 bedrooms, or our story buildings, 3 or 4 to 5 bedrooms at very affordable prices with flexible payment plans at our Sanyang Seaview Estate, where you can enjoy the cool breeze with modern infrastructure such as tar roads, covered drainage system, modern electrification with street lights, gated entrance with security posts, and social amenities such as gas station, shopping mall, medical clinic, park, schools, children daycare, and a lot more. Our dedicated team of professionals will keep the estate clean at all times, provide security and patrol team within the estate premises, install latest technologies such as CCTV, Wi-Fi, home network installation, solar panel, and power backup system. Also, check out for our additional home facilities and interior design service such as premium tiling, wall plaster, home landscape, fingerprint home lock, and a lot more. Visit our office at Senegambia Kololi Highway and get a free site visit tour, or contact us on 4464-838. WhatsApp us on 3259220. Or you can visit our Facebook page or Instagram on EJ Investments. EJ Investments, we are first in properties.
Islamic microfinance is becoming an increasingly popular mechanism for poverty alleviation, especially for developing countries around the world. This microfinance service adheres to the principles of Islam as a form of social responsibility. Yona Islamic Microfinance is the Islamic microfinance of choice in the Gambia, trustworthy and reliable. At Yona Islamic Microfinance, we provide savings products, current accounts, financing products in conformity with Islam. In addition, Yona Islamic Microfinance also offers local and international remittances, takaful fund, management of zakat, management of awqaf, trading and investment, and building of strategic partnerships to bring financial services to the doorstep of the poor with donor projects, madrasas, youth organizations, women groups, and farmer organizations. Make a choice with Yona Islamic Microfinance today. For more information on Yona Islamic Microfinance, call 377-2151 or 9832-151, or visit Yona head office at Tipa Garage, Bakote, or visit any Yona branch located countrywide near you.
Thank you very much to everybody present. Thank you to the media, our partners, for coming. Thank you to all our guests. I want to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Jain, the party leader of APP. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming. We also appreciate everybody here representing other party leaders that have been invited. We invited all the political parties registered under the IEC to come and grace this occasion. Also in our midst, we have party members, supporters, sympathizers, the citizenry, because this is an event for Gambia. This is an event that we want to engage with Gambians on the CA's 10-point promise. We believe we are a government in waiting, and as such, everything that we do should be to the interest of the citizenry, should be to the interest of Gambians, and as such, we need to engage, we need to discuss, we need to interact on everything that we do. That's the reason why we are here today. Without much ado, I'm going to invite the National President of the Citizens Alliance, Mr. Dominic Mendy, to come forward and give us an introduction of today's event. Mr. Dominic Mendy, please.
Well, I am privileged to yet again stand before this nation and talk about the basis on which the electorate will determine whether they entrust the Citizens Alliance with the duty to govern them. And I want us to understand very critically and very, very poignantly what govern them means. You know, has a right to govern, and in fact, everybody governs oneself. Now, and I want also to remind you that ours is an alliance of citizens, and that is why we are called Citizens Alliance. We recognize that when we are elected into government, we are not only a government for the people who voted us into office. We are a government for everybody. Those who vehemently oppose our being voted into office, including those who have voted us into office, because they are all Gambians. May they be in the Gambia or abroad. They are all Gambians. And also not only Gambians, but people of other nationalities that reside and make livelihoods in this country, even though they do not have the opportunity to vote. But once anybody operates within this jurisdiction, we think we are an alliance with you in terms of being able to bring together the needed wisdom to make this country better. Anybody who lives here, it is because he thinks or she thinks that this country is a place where one can live in dignity and honesty. And so there is nobody whose opinion is too little. And now, today, we are having a town hall. This is going to be about the 4th town hall we are going to have. And you know, town halls really effectively come from the US. You know, congressmen are selected from about 52 US states. And so when they are selected, when they are elected, they go to Washington. And that's where they serve. To move from one US state to Washington, some states, it takes you about 2 or 3 hours flight, or even 4 hours. So it means, therefore, when once you are elected into government, into Congress, and you go to Washington, you have actually departed from your people. So you hardly can have real direct contact with your people. And so they came with this creativity of a town hall. So they come back to their constituencies, and they rent halls, and they invite citizens, and they have the opportunity of talking to citizens directly, about the issues that continue to affect them, how their representative is representing them in Washington, whether he's doing that sufficiently and adequately, and the issues that they need to bring before Washington on which their representative needs to do some work. And so it enables continuous linkage between the representative and the people at the district level, and also it enables throughput of the ideas and the concerns of the people at the district level to Washington, where the decisions are going to be made, where the laws will be passed, where the budgets will be determined, and where development and priority financing will be decided upon and allocated. So in spite of the fact that they have moved from their constituencies to Washington, they are still together with their representative and their. And because we are an alliance of citizens, we have in the very beginning, even before even launching this party, started the idea of town halls. And the first one we had was in Kanifing. So I want once again to ask you to recognize the wisdom around this town hall and invite you to participate sufficiently in the town hall. It is to listen to our presentations about our 10-point plan. It is for you to ask questions. It is for you to ask questions with the objective of understanding what the 10-point plan. To you to ask questions to determine whether in fact the 10-point plan are feasible. And if they are feasible, how can they be prioritized? How can they be structured? I mean, there is no one state in this world that has enough money to do all it wants to do in 1 year. Not even the United States of America, the biggest economy in the world. But then there must be prioritization. So you judge the wisdom of what is laid before you in terms of how scarce resources in economic terms will be prioritized and programmed in such a way that after a given period of time, you start to see those decisions translate into development, economic dynamism and activity, increased employment, increased well-being, infrastructure, good schools, good hospitals, stability and security. Security not only from bodily harm, but security of income, security of livelihood. That is exactly what we are here to do. In this case, I want to recognize our National Executive Committee. Our National Executive Committee is imbued in voluntarism and in pragmatic honesty, because really, as a new party, we do not have the latitude of having a lot of resources to even give to people, our national executive members, to pay their ways back. So everything that anybody in our national executive does, he or she really does it out of voluntarism. And that is what we expect from true citizens of a nation. And that is what we must be able to show to you people, because that's what we are selling to you as a citizen. We are the only party in this country that has a spokeswoman. We recognize that there are two broad constituencies of citizens in every country, naturally defined, male or female. And ours is female in the person of Nene Frida Gomez. So we illustrate to the highest extent possible the gender sensitivity and the gender requirements of political process in this country, the need for gender inclusion. We also, in our national executive, have representation from the diaspora. Ali Jany is the president of the diaspora wing of the Citizens Alliance, and he's a member of our national executive. And given the prowess of technology today, Ali Jany is linked to us virtually in everything that we do. He's probably already linked to what we are doing now. So we want to illustrate how it is that in this 21st century, you necessarily don't need to be in the Gambia to participate effectively in the Gambia's development. And that is what Dr. Cisse is going to come, our party leader, our great party leader, is going to talk to you about. And when I sat with Dr. Tere, I gave you my bag, or we gave you our bags, and I'm sure you could recognize us from our heads. And if you watch his head and watch mine, you would have thought that I was the party leader, wouldn't you? And all of a sudden you saw that young man being party leader and say, what's that young little boy doing there with those old people and calling himself party leader? But let me tell you this. Dr. Cisse is not as young as you think. He's not 19 years old. He's 46 years. Barack Obama became the president of the United States when he was 45 years. That is the biggest economy in the world. So if he could have, tell me that Dr. Cisse cannot be the president and an effective leader of 2.3 million people. Of course, he can. And I tell you this, Dr. Cisse is, if you believe me, I will tell you this, and I want you to take this from me, and I want you to test this as you move on. If you talked about humility, it is Dr. Cisse. If you talk about wisdom, it is Dr. Cisse. If you talk about yar ak tegin, it is Dr. Cisse. That's what I'm telling you. That's the type of person I'm presenting to you. And that's the type of person I'm presenting to this nation. Wisdom, honesty, integrity, purposefulness. And he will lead this nation if you let him do. And this nation will be transformed and we'll all be happier and better. That's what I'm telling you today, if you believe that. So I want once more to welcome you to this town hall meeting. And please make it a town hall. Ask your questions, make comments, add value. It is only when you add value that the Citizens Alliance is a true alliance. Once again, thanks for coming, and I look forward to a very effective and inspiring town hall. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you for the acknowledgement. I don't know why I forgot to brag one more time, because every podium that I stand on, I always like to remind people that I'm the only spokeswoman in all the political parties. You know, I carry that chip on my shoulders. I'm proud because it has never happened. So for some reason, I forgot about it. So thank you, Dominic, for reminding me. Before we move on, I also want to acknowledge the presence of my brother here, Mr. Fofana, who's helping us to talk to do the sign language interpretation, because in Citizens Alliance, we consider everybody. We want everybody to be part of what we do and see themselves in what we do. And also, a few months ago, another brother of ours from their community helped us to talk to their people, but unfortunately he cannot be here because we lost him. He passed away a month ago. So I just want us to please remember him in our prayers and pray that his soul will be received in Jannah. Amen. Next on our agenda here, what I have is to do an introduction of the town hall event objectives. Dominic spoke a lot about it, so I wouldn't bore you much into the details of the objectives. But the objectives of this town hall is clear. Is to engage with you, with everybody, is to dialogue. And we invite you here so that everybody will feel, have a sense of belonging, some sense of ownership in Citizens Alliance Party. And that's why we call an alliance, Citizens Alliance. It's an alliance of Gambians. It's an alliance of the people. So you need to see yourselves in everything that we do. And of course, when you come here and listen to these 10-point promises, it gives you an opportunity to understand it better and to be able to critique, not criticize, but to critique, and hopefully add value to it, to make it better. Because this is for us, all of us, the people. So that is the reason why we bring you here, and we're going to do this more often. It's not going to be a one-off. That we will engage, we will dialogue, we will discuss to be able to get a better development plan to govern this country. We all know, I'm sure you will agree, that this country yearns for leadership, a visionary leader, a leader that can take this country from where we are right now to where this country needs to be. And I'm sure we know where we want to be as a country. So it does not take anything but the right leadership to get that to happen. And that is why we want to bring all of you here for us together pave that way. Open that discussion platform that we all give or take ideas to be able to come up with that kind of a government we're yearning for. So I'm going to move right on and call on our party leader, Dr. Ismaila Cisse, who will be taking you through the 10-point promises one by one. And please listen and take note so that you'll be able to ask the questions, the hows, the whys, the whens, the whos. Very, very important. Because if I tell you I'm going to take you to Banjul, you don't know where Banjul is, and you don't ask me how I'm going to take you to Banjul, whether I'm going to carry you on my back, whether I'm going to hold you in the hand to walk with you, I'm going to put you in a car, I'm going to put you on a donkey cart. If we don't get there, you can blame me because we never discussed those. I never laid it out for you. So you will not be able to hold me to account. And that's what we're trying to open a platform for citizens to know how important it is to hold whoever their leader is to account by first of all knowing the direction that he or she is going to take you through. And that's what we're trying to do here. This exercise was not a document or plans that Dr. Cisse sat in his bedroom and put down on paper. It took an extensive and vigorous consultation with different subject expert specialists to come up with this document, with the citizenry, with everybody that really had an insight in what we're doing, and then we came up with these 10-point plans. It's not cast in stone, it's a progressive document, and we hope that whatever you guys information you will give us here today and continue to give us will only help us better this 10-point plan. And when we get to government, come December 5th, we'll be able to start implementing it as all of you have advised us, all of you have added value to this document. So on that note, I want to call on Dr. Ismaila Cisse to get into the discussions proper. Thank you very much.
The last time we met in this room on the 29th of July to unveil the 10-point plan to the Gambian people, the 10-point promise to be more precise. Immediately after the event, I was reading through the comments on social media, and someone made a very funny comment that Dr. Cisse slept at night and dreamt of these big things and woke up in the morning and came to paradise to tell Gambians that is what he is going to do. So the purpose of this meeting today is to tell you that this dream can be realized. Is to discuss, to give every Gambian the opportunity, both those living in the Gambia who can be present here today and in the diaspora, to provide an interactive platform where we can discuss how we are going to build 100,000 homes, for example, how we are going to ensure we provide 100,000 jobs in our first 5 years. So today, that is the purpose. I'll not be making elaborate presentations today. I want this session to be an interactive session, a discussion, a town hall, where everybody in this room and those who can join virtually to have the chance to ask critical questions as to how are you going to implement this 10-point promise in your first 5 years. Like Nene mentioned, the 10-point promise was not the result of Dr. Cisse's dreams at night. It culminated from intensive consultations with subject matter experts by looking at the country as a whole, our strengths, our weaknesses, the opportunities, the gaps, the benchmarks, the projections. Based on these, and in consultation with subject matter experts in the different sectors, we came to realize that to build a modern country, that to transform the Gambia from a low-income economy to a middle-income country with a diversified economic base, where inclusive growth and prosperity is assured. These are the 10 things we need to do. And when we say inclusive growth, it means that we have to grow together as a country. It's unfair if the people of the Combos or Banjul, Serekunda, and the urban areas are growing, while those living in rural Gambia are not growing. We have to grow together. It's like having a family where you have kids. Some of your kids are going to good schools, and some don't have access to the good education. Some of your kids have access to quality health care. Some of your kids don't have. What that will do is that within the family, growth is unequal. That is, your kids are not growing together as a family, and that will cause problems later on in society. It means that some of your children will grow up to become what they want to become and get the jobs that they want to have. Some of your children will not. So therefore, for us to have inclusive growth, inclusive prosperity, to move the Gambia from a low-income economy to a middle and emerging income economy, these are the 10-point promises. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge first, to thank those who made not only the 10-point possible, but also those who made this event possible. The entire executive of the Citizens Alliance, I'd like to thank you. I don't want to mention names because otherwise we'll spend the whole day here. The subject matter experts who helped in making sure that we have this 10-point promise. Some of them are here today, and I think when it's time for them to give contributions, why we bring them here is to scrutinize and critique what we think is the way to implement these 10-point plans so we can learn more from them. They are here, some of them are here today, and they'll be introduced by Nene Frida later on before they make their contributions. But also the volunteers who are here today to make sure that the house is clean and to make sure everything is going well. Mr. Fofana for providing the sign language for us so that nobody is discriminated against. and the media, the cameramen, everyone, our regional chairpersons who are also present here today. And I thank everyone, but also Fatima and Co, the consultant that was engaged to plan the event. They've done a brilliant job. Everybody, I thank you all. So this is going to be CA's long-term vision for the Gambia, like I said, to transform the country from a low-income nation to an emerging middle-income economy where inclusive growth is assured. Number one, a CA government promises to diversify the economy, to drive growth and job creation. Not only that, to reform the civil service and state-owned enterprises, and ensure that we eradicate corruption. This is important because 48% of our people live in abject poverty. Gambia is considered the 8th poorest country in the world with a GDP per capita of $488. Now, low revenue obviously leads to what? High budget deficit, and also our high debt stock. Today, Gambia's debt stock is $79 billion. Budget deficit is about $5.99 billion. That is 5.61% of GDP. Our debt to GDP ratio is 78% and 200% of internally generated funds. This is not sustainable. You cannot borrow money to borrow more money to pay off your debts for debt financing. So we have to find innovative ways of ensuring that we create money using different innovative models to fund public investment projects. Civil service also needs to be more efficient to ensure that they are responsive to the needs of the citizens so that we can fight corruption within the civil service. That is high perceived corruption. But also we motivate civil servants because abenyameng bi ni mu man sakunda do kulati. Ila jomam betia. Do kudula fana isulata fengo jorango mina purka do ko katije. Ako kolya bagle statu ni mudimba tioti. Nga remember birimbe no yuti jinkata brikama campus. Ntol mi alon ko na joman siano ntol mi alon ko ntol man sakunda do kulati. Janin karo ka fa nga kodo minke karala purka essence sang akabanne. Nka moneke nka na moto park Westfield le nga dum gele gelola nga da karandi rola andung miyo tati no man ko man sone yanu diningol mi alon ke kata wole karandi karambo ngoto ini wole kasi gele killing ini karanyo la college pour kate karandi so pour ka jokko fana man sakunda do kulal isi do ko keno anyama nka fo miye ko katile mbal ya minke man sakunda isaje sa bulano oto ndanta kila jul fana la fa fondinkel mi alon ko ngeki karango la banta foi pareta ilafta ka senang njanta ka jeko na civil service parita la pour que ta isi do ko mi alon ko isa keno wala nan ko man sakunda do ko bunda nyi fonsa falindro falingolong civil service reformed. But also the state-owned enterprises must be reformed, structural reforms, to ensure that their primary purpose of service delivery and financial performance is enhanced, because they are supposed to do those two things. But today, that is not the case. So that is when it comes to number one. Number two, mbengala ne ko bi do ko man soto. Funding kel man do ko soto. Fo bi funding ke jamal beje ani fondi musol e koy fa ba ko no wole fisia ye si ila bankon kan. The unemployment rate is 40%, especially youth unemployment, 41.5%. But unemployment generally is 35%. But those who are mostly affected are women, youth, and the rural folk. So therefore, CA is promising to provide 100,000 jobs. Not only that, but also to progressively impose the minimum wage and also provide a scheme for women to have access to finances. Today, only 4% of those who are working earn more than $10,000 a month, 4%. Not only that, our population is 2.3 million, 17 years is the median age, but we are also made to understand through the Gambia Labor Force Survey of 2018 that 1.3 million of our population are in the labor force or are ready to be in the labor force. 60,000 every month, every year are also ready to be in the labor force. So therefore, we need to find ways to ensure that this growing population, because our population is growing, at the rate, fertility rate of this country is 5.3% per woman, 5.3 child per woman. It means that the population will grow very fast. We need to start thinking of what jobs will be available for our growing population. Because today, society nga nekk ndaw sa ay fayal lak ba nga jeexal grade 12 nga dem ba nga jeexal university mun loo am liggéey sa jël alalam yar la jàngal la ba nga wàcca mu foog ne fu mu nekk nii war nga am liggéey pour nga dimbale ko nga dimbale sa boppa waaye nga wàcca university wala college mun loo am liggéey nga toog si kër gi te ñëpp xam nañ nu mu dee demee soo amutee liggéey fii Gambia fii nga toog si kër gi ñëpp xam nañ ko soo nekkee ndaw kenn du la jox cër ñun mi nga xam ne ñoo dem ci Europe ñëwaat semestre ñoom lañ gën a jox cër dan yow mi nga xam ne yaa ngi fi jàng ba pare mun loo am liggéey ñëpp dañuy foog ne yow nit ko am ne la tekki wala kon pour ñu gis ne suñ ndaw yi am nañ liggéey foog ñu ibi yaatal jumtukaay yooyu noonu pour ndaw yi mën a am liggéey taxi am jigéen yoo xam ne tey ñu ngi bugg a daan seen doole ñi nekk si garden yi ñi nekk si marché jënd ak jaay yi waaye amuñ xaalis amuñ départ bu xam ne moo leen a jàppale pour ñu mën a def seen business bi wala pour ñu mën a dimbale seen boppa si garden yi. That is why CA is saying that we are going to expand women's access to finances mooy gis ne ñu isi pexe yoo xam ne jigéen yooyu nañ am mën a am xaalis dimbal si wàllum xaalis pour ñu mën a def li nga xam ne loolu lañ bëgg a def. Number 3, today as we speak, only 13% of rural population and 71% of urban population have access to electricity, and 34% of households use safe drinking water. Electricity supply is erratic, as we all know. This morning before I left home, and I think yen ñep experience ngeen ko fii nii, light daf dee mel ni man xawma lan la. Every 2-3 minutes mu ngi dem ak a ñëw di yaa bagage nit ñi. Soo nekkee waajur mi nga xam ne yow fu mu nekk sa salaire sa mutut ñu dem yaa sa freezer wala sa fridge wala li nga xam ne loolu nga soxla pour nga mën a dunda foog nga dem di ko jënda kon tey foog ñu seet naka la ñoo mën a isi pexe yoo xam ne nañ mën a yaatal si mbiri courant bi. That is why we are saying that we are going to facilitate expansion of infrastructure and upgraded technology to ensure we have reliable, clean, and affordable electricity. Not only that, to bring in the innovative systems and investments that will ensure that every household in the Gambia have access to clean drinking water. Sometimes, ñun mi nga xam ne ñoo nekka fii urban Gambia, we take these things for granted. But milialon ko be sabatering in rural Gambia, watiro jio kake problem onati. Ikara sate dolto. Faloli ni sol kemi jumbi netol fanan kemi wo jiolla. You go to some nga dem si yana deka, ñi nga xam ne ay junne ñoo fa deka, ndox amu fa. Benn teen rek moo fa nekk. Te ñu ne ñëpp biir Gambia lañ nekk. Te loolu dafa métti si ñi nga xam ne ñoo fa nekk te ndox mooy lépp. Diine sax pour nga mën a mooy bépp diine rek pour nga mën a jaamu yàlla bu baax sax da nga soxla ndox si lépp kon am dëkk yoo xam ne amuñ ndox loolu li nga am daf dañ koo ñaawlu kon that is why we are saying that we are going to ensure that every household has access to clean drinking water. Tay access to healthcare is not equitable. It's a big problem. There's also no quality. But also, ñi nga xamné ñoo nekk di liggéey ci fanna bobu nonu foog ñu dolel leen mooy nurse yi ak docteur yi ak social workers yi tey maa ngi dem benn dëkka bu yàggut nii te nee ne toppoon na ma foofu noonu sax ñu dem Sibito Kabada Central Kiang benn clinique rek moo fa nekk benn clinique benn nurse lañ fa assign mi nga xam ne dafa di ñëw once every week so diggante ku feebar wala jigéen bu mat war a wasin foog ñu bala kuy ne la about 9 to 12 kilometers away te amut ambulance yoon bi nag dafa bon torop sax yooyu mooy saret wax nañ ñu ne te ñii sax gis nañ ko parce que nee du nga ne si clinique bi that day unfortunately am na ku doon wasin foofu noonu amul benn dimbal ma gis ne génn si muy jooy ma ne ko looy jooy lu mu gis la si clinique te kooku sax xëj na foofu la wasine waaye su doon noos bi mu fa woon dañ ko doon teg si saret su nekkee guddi ak taw mi ak yoon bu bon bi léegi-léegi am nañu dee wasin si kaw saret bi doom bi di génn nii muy daanu parce que ñu ngi ko gëm a yóbbu kuy na la 24th century Gambia te nga gis jigéen mi nga xam ne mu ngi matu wala ki nga dafa sola deret mu ngi tëdda di xaar deret hospital tey ñuy wóor di ñaan kana mën a donner deret groupe O wala groupe AB wala groupe C am suñ benn ndaw bu nga xam ne Citizens Alliance la nekkoon ku bëggoon Citizens Alliance Mr Jallow dafa moon driving school di jàngal ndaw yi naka la ñoo dawalee oto suba mu xëyee bàyyi jabootam bàyyi waa këram bàyyi waa joram ne mu ngi dem liggéey si liggéeykaay bi mu am ak benn xaritam problème kooku jam ko paaka si loxo lu ndaw lu mel ni loolu si loxo mu dem Bakoteh gaa ne ko amuñ deret demal uti deret nga dem RVTH mu ut deret dem RVTH ki mu jox deret bi kooku réeral deret bi balaa nga ne 8 situation am bi stade critical ñu dugal ko théâtre ñu sol ko ndox balaa nga ne 10 dee na biir Gambia fii loolu si lu mu gën a métti du si waajur gi rek de ñu ko jur waaye si noos yi nga xam ne pare nañ pour jàppale ko pour mu dunda mënuñ ko parce que liñ soxla pour ñu def loolu mënuñ koo am dafa métti si xaw loolu moo tax ñun ñu ne léegi Citizens Alliance dafa improve access du access rek de luy access mooy ñëpp am access to healthcare daf du jaaduwut ñi am access ñi amul access waaye tamit equity man access bu ma façon yi healthcare bu ma am yow sa doom am ko ki nekk Bijilo ak ki nekk Bonto ñëpp a access to quality healthcare ba pare ñu amee healthcare scheme boo xam ne ñi nga xam ne liggéeyuñ wala mag lañ wala seen salary baaxut duñ fay pour am access to quality healthcare ñu dem si wàllum njàngale bi te gis nañ ne illiteracy bi dafa high Gambia loolu lu mu dee jur mooy ne ñii dinañ am liggéey ñi amul liggéey waaye tamit ñi nga xam ne jëm nañ ba jàng école ba jeexal grade 12 mënuñoo am liggéey te mënuñu dem university lan la ñoo def pour ñooñu. We've realized that the COVID-19 has affected a lot of people. A lot of students got only 4 credits. Not because it's their fault, because the education system was disrupted by COVID-19 and they could not access university education. So what do we do with them? We have very little skills training centers in this country or vocational institutes to ensure that those who are not academically oriented are provided the necessary skills so they can also have decent jobs in this country. Lord Mota Citizens Alliance, we are going to reform education sector. Pour gis ne façon jàng bu ñoo am it is inclusive mooy ñëpp dañ si war a am góor jigéen mag ndaw ndax laago ga ndax doo laago ndax rural nga di ka ndax obaan comme que Gambian nga rek jàng bi xale bu nekk war nga am benn façon jàng mi nga xam ne moo laa jox quality education su boobaa soo magee nga jàng nga jàng ba wàcca loo mun di jàng rek war nga see mën a am liggéey boo xam ne di nga si mën a Turkey. Number 6. Today, one thing we've also observed is that the potential of the agro-industry, that is agriculture and its entire value chain, has been immensely unrealized, and that the sector is underperforming. That is why today we have very low yields when it comes to cereals, 841 kilograms per hectare, well below the African average of 1,200 to 1,300. Now, low yields obviously, so low returns, meaning farmers don't have enough money to feed their families. We've also seen the seasonal nature of agriculture as well. Today, Gambia is a net food importer. It means that we import more food than we export, because 90% of food consumed by households comes from outside. And also, we've seen also what the impacts: high food costs. Over 50% of income, household income, goes to food, depriving family heads to invest in education, healthcare, and other stuff. Because if your income is $100, and because of high food costs, you have to pay $60 on food alone, you are left with only $40 to go by for the end of the month. Cash power is expensive. Medical care is expensive. School spending is expensive. So how do you go by? That is why ACA government is saying that we are going to facilitate investments in climate resilient in agriculture to enhance what productivity. So we produce more. Not only that, so we can achieve food security. Mona namba for climate resilient. Ngajale ko bi otumo sama kana wato minna aning sanya mankiling. Otumo me doyaring by me sanjo kanale. Isaje Sénégal ika firo commencé wato le. Bari saj alhawa tinyat alhawa bedunta nyokone fo sa sama bukana fo August ma fangola. Wolon tata bantanton ding Sénégal do diamuta. Ay mimbe fini songa bele tinyat. Baw ay sama expect wato mina sama manna wato la ko be fi. Sama manna fo August. Odo sa mbakala nyaare le pour kaje ko na Sénégal ye nyim faham ko sa alhawa falintale. Sama kana wato minna aning akana nyameng amang kiling san. Pour ise firot kala juna isaje ise firo ka wato la ba oni wulula yala kodota fengo fa mimba investment obe ay turo sang ay jambando sang ay sembota ya senoke fo parira ga merako sama binale pour asa dimbal dañini a dingola karamo jo aje ko sama man na nyanta kana wato ala fere fengo be tinyata andung insurance tije mialon ka sa demano ka je ko ala tinyaro min kala sa sotono o mu tinyar baleti oton kombe min kala sañ kaje ko Sénégal ngi makoy ise seno ke seno mi alonko al hawala jahaso tela seno la estatela seno tinyala bari seno fanan si na seno na Sénégal fanan nse dema ke sementu ya pukaji ko bi Gambia sa fan dañini no bawo bi mbukam fan dañini. Next point please. We all are aware today that there is high level of rural urban migration. And because of that, there has been a huge demand for housing, especially in urban Gambia. 60% of our population live in urban Gambia. But urban Gambia was not built to house 60% of the population, because we did not have what they call inclusive growth. Growth was one-sided and lopsided and unequal. That is, growth was only concentrated in urban Gambia. This is where most of the jobs are, most of the amenities, good healthcare facilities, and good schools. An example, there is no single private school beyond Brikama, for example. So because of that, and there are no jobs as well in rural Gambia, most of the young people who want to find jobs come to urban Gambia. And because of that now, housing is a problem. And we've also looked at data from the 2018 Labor Force Survey and extrapolated that we extrapolated data from that one, and it tells us that we need to build 52,000 housing units to fill the housing deficit, especially for low-income earners, those that are below grade 10. And because of that, population increase, growth, we have to think ahead that how many housing units do we need to build in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years to fill that gap? And as a result, CA is promising to build 100,000 affordable homes. For the first phase, obviously, will target low-income earners below grade 10. Because admittedly, ye karango bang ye man sakunda do ko soto. For police oleti bang, for noso, for social worker, for fire service, for prison. Karfa jo doya tale doya mealon ko ate korda fa sande no surtout ka bunga fa loye. Sabe luwa sokono. Sanji tan nani be man sakunda do ko la. De paso fa mo ke fa dañi no saka bunga lo. Sanji tan nani man sakunda do ko ke. Foi pare ye safe ko sañ ke man isembo bantale sa man sule la kotenke wala retirement ko le foi retire means what sañ ke ba fole kari a barka ba ke man sakunda saf bari saji sembo bantale ta su ko ne sa batu wala retirement man sule la kotenke sembete la koten pour ka do ko ke sañi tan nani yese su ko no folo fe mira la sa be lo waso le kono ibe luwa soko andu menga pensional ka moja pensional mona do tuara do bukata kam mafamba mansia keme sabalon keme nani keme dulu etara luwa soko no sanjital nani in la dimbayal ye fa luwa soko e dimbaltu luwa soko no odon ko kawo bay we are going to build 100,000 affordable homes to target low income earners below grade 10. Obviously one first phase the pilot maybe not demanding sa expand no kadul fanang target. Next. The environment. Environmental issues have become key concerns, especially for security. We've seen what happened in Faraba Bantang. The commission's report is out there. In Gunjur, in Sanyang. These are all examples that environmental issues have security implications. Currently, we face a looming environmental catastrophe because of the irresponsible and unsustainable way in which we are using our environment. Our forest covers, we've lost almost all our forest cover through logging and bushfires. We are depleting our marine resources. Today, every night, it is estimated that 300 industrial trolleys, foreign industrial trolleys, are in our territorial waters, in our exclusive economic zone, because every country has what they call the territorial waters, and they give extra 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone. It means that within that 200 nautical miles, everything of resources, marine, oil, it's yours. Therefore, but it doesn't belong to this generation alone. It also belongs to the next generation. So therefore, we must preserve it for them. But today, we are using them unsustainably. The random way in which we are doing licensing, it doesn't really make sense. So we need to protect our marine resources, our flora and fauna, and also to protect our biodiversity. This is linked to tourism. There's what they call bird watching. It's a high-value tourist experience. Many tourists come here for that. Because of the way we are destroying the biodiversity, most of these birds are migrating to other places. It's destroying our chances to have a proper tourism industry. So this is key. That is why we are saying that we are going to protect the environment. How do we do that? We are going to tackle industrial pollution. Fish factory sol milbes katong sanyang tanji aning jindulal de benna al hawa beti nyakande anun kamune soroje bi ala fonne bawe be kombole aldu la kilim fonne dinkira kombo mialon ko nyille ya lo pour fondin kel si karanje ye do ko soto amon soto otom benna dulal beti nyakang ba be wafikang. So what we are going to do is tackle industrial pollution, protect marine resources, invest in clean energy and waste management. 100% of our energy needs today is using fossil fuels. Global financial shocks makes us vulnerable. Benim tuloda seleta in the world market. abuko bi woton do fana mbasanda mina be sherale memen jola pour cash pa be selelale. So to avoid that, we are going to invest in clean energy. So we can use solar, hydro, and wind. These are cheap renewable sources that are indigenous to reduce dependence on fossil fuel, but also to protect our flora and fauna. Crime rates have increased in the past couple of months or couple of years, and we all know that. I think most of us are even victims here. We are victims. We've seen that. Therefore, our criminal justice system also is in shambles. Mediamu Kante right now, amna ñi nga xamne ñu ngi mayal tu waruñ fa nek. Ay ndaw yo xamne defuñ dara lu dut dañ leen ti ak ben ñaari joint. Ñu wala mayal tu ñu faté leen fofu non. Amuñ lawyer bu leena jappalé. Amuñ kenn ki leena jappalé. Ñu ngi fa 1 2 3 4 years ñu faté leen fofu. Ñi seen fal dafa rir sax. Nga dem mayal tu prison lu mu wara téki moy ki nga xamne da nga togn askan wi da nga togn society moy crime. Duñ la wara jëre pini la wa nañ la pini wa tamit ñu defaraat la mo ñu rehabilitate la ñu dugal la mayal tu soy gennaat nga genna nekkat benen façon nit konté mayal tu war nañ ko reform bo xamné té ki fa dem mu nekk ndaw war nga fa jàngé métier soy genna nga am ab fuñ la dem nga dem nekk apprenti nga mëna am liggéey parce que suñ la gëé nonu tamit defuñ lolu da nga delluwaat fofu nonu kon fo ñu gis né criminal justice system bi ñu reform ko wa tamit suñ police officer yi fire service, immigration, prison. Fok ñu dolel len, we strengthen and equip and ensure public safety. Ñu am bagage yo xamné yu lañu liggéey. Metti na nga nek police officer, gis nañ ko kéro ben police jigen police officer. Mu ngi taw, mu taw ci trafic bi di control trafic. Pour ré bu accident am. Slippers la sol. Luma ci gëna jaaxal moy né bu lolu happené ba paré, lañ start di ko recognize. Ñu ngi ko may ay xar ñi di ko jox promote déedéet waruñoo xaar loolu waruñoo xaar benn dee si trafic police officer dee si trafic balaa ñu mën a acte léegi lañ war a dooleel police yi ñu mën a def seen liggéey bu baax jox leen matériel yi communication gadgets lépp loo xam ne soxla nañ ko muy daala muy uniforme ñu mën a liggéey seen liggéey pour ñu mën a aar askan bi fire service a ngi nii tey su nekk di tàkka luñ dañ nekk suñ ñëwee dañoo seet ndax dafa rinda ri balaa ñu deli ndox du seen faute foo ñu yokk seen salaire ñu motivate leen ñu jox leen matériel yu ñoo liggéeyee jox leen xam-xam bu ñoo liggéeyee suba ñu mën a saaf askan bi loolu moo tax ñun ñu ne suñ ñëwee ñoo improve standards of living mooy dañoo gis ne képp ko xam ne yaa ngi si dëkk bi nooy dundee ñu yokk ko parce que nit su amee liggéey dundaam bi baax du dem sàcc wala di commettre na façon crime comme pour ñu daaxa crime ak yenn façon crime yu bari foog ñu gis na nit ñi ñu dooleel leen si seen dund gi mooy tax bañ fight root cause of crime waaye tamit criminal justice system bi foog ñu reform ko bépp ñu gis ne kenn warta toog mile two fekk waruloo faa nekka mile two ñu defaraat ko suba ki fa nekka sooy génnaat da ngaa ñëw nekkaat nit bu baax ba pare ñu jàppale police yi number 10 today there's a huge deficit in the Gambia's road infrastructure. It is estimated that we have 1,600 miles of roads in this country, but only 35% of these is paved. The current condition of basic roads really poses serious constraints to growth, but we've also seen the rising number of accidents in the country today. We've also seen that public transport is non-existent, and people are left at the mercy of the commercial drivers. And adimitale imu alfati, ibe sabatering farat wala brikama wala kimbuje, ibe dokala hotel industry, ila karfa jomansia. Niko paso jola wodo kana lolun kana hotel industry, ila salary be kara pass jola. Boss and travel ka fo niko pass jola brikama dan farato. Fare jije pass jojo for lamen. Eji Tabokoto, Westfield. Then be fotala hotel industry. Keme data paso tola. Sa kemo neo jo luolun kana do kola. Omu keme sab wuli sabaleti karo kono. Ne bondi joto fen man tuje. Oda dimitale yeka wululade. Eka lift dani somanda fo suto. pukana do kola Cameroon kotenke nta ngajele funding kel mialonko e kalifle dani kana do kola luolo anin Cameroon ni bodo ya 7 e buka futa do kola fa talantang e ji talantang e buka futa so fo tusuto I believe dano ngajele fana accident ol siata andung sign tolman emergency service so mi accident ketansi mol demano access to healthcare so pour ka futa san ka be bay nko we are going to expand and then strengthen public transport mais silol fanundi lale nga silol lafa nga silol da ko nga traffic jam jele all of us know what's happening with the traffic jams all of us experience it in this room today the amount of time we lose yearly in aggregate in traffic jams is a lot of time. The last time it took me 2 hours from Kotu to Turntable, 2 hours, one evening, 2 hours. If you aggregate around the year, the amount of money we spend in vehicle maintenance is in the millions, if not billions of dollars, because the roads are bad. And this affects mostly taxi drivers. They pay more road tax, but what they pay is even much more than the road tax in terms of vehicle maintenance, because the roads are bad. So we need to make sure that we expand roads, we strengthen roads, but not only that, digital infrastructure. We need to expand and strengthen digital infrastructure. The world is moving towards the digital world. And recently we all saw what happened with COVID. When COVID struck, we were forced to close schools. Kids were forced to stay at home to do e-learning. How can you do e-learning if you don't have access to strong internet? Most kids failed exams because of that. But what will that do also is to provide opportunities for e-commerce, which will boost the economy in the healthcare sector, and so on and so forth. So these are things that CCA government promises to deliver in our first 5 years in office. Like I said, this is not for me to come and elaborate on presentations. Today is for us to discuss and for the public to be given the opportunity to ask relevant questions as to how we are going to expand road transportation, how we are going to build 100,000 homes, how we are going to create 100,000 jobs, how we are going to ensure that our economy is diversified. Today, Gambia is losing $1.2 billion in what? In tax waivers. And 60% of these tax waivers are given on a discretionary basis. That's what we are losing, $1.6 billion in tax waivers alone. We are losing $300 million because we failed to implement the vehicle policy. All these are money that can be saved and invested elsewhere. And so many other ways in which, in terms of utilities, in the public, in terms of operational costs of ministries and departments and agencies. So the idea for this one is for us to discuss together, and so we can answer relevant questions. We are happy and we thank our subject matter experts here today. And then I will introduce them later. Why are they here? So that they hold us accountable or they check what we say as politicians. Well, we are politicians. We make promises, even though some of these promises are unrealistic. We bring them here today to tell us that this one is unrealistic, this one is possible, but you have to do X, so that the discussion can be balanced, and not only politicians will come and say big words, but we have all subject matter experts who can also make sure that what we are making makes sense, it is realistic, but also it is relevant for us to pursue that. So I thank you very much. I'm looking forward to lively discussions in the next coming hours. Thank you.
So please, if you want to ask a question on the presentation that Doctor has just concluded, put your hand up, introduce yourself, and ask your questions or comment or a critique on what Doctor has just presented. So the floor is open for us to engage. It's a town hall. It's supposed to be an engagement, a discussion. So let's make it participatory, please, okay? And of course, it's not only Doctor. You can direct your questions to Doctor, to Mr. Dominic, to Mr. Nyangjai, or to Mr. William as well. And of course, if needs be, Elizabeth will contribute. She's online as well.
You know, Gambians, some people may see me on TV and say, is he a member of CA now? But as a development worker, I think we also have a role in the country when we are invited in such fora to attend. Because some of the things you are talking here are going to impact on the lives and livelihoods of the rural people that we serve. And when I say we serve, we as NGOs and CSOs, we have a big role. We participate a lot in the development, or we contribute to the development of this country. And if a political party invites us, of course we have to come and listen to what you have for the citizenry, to the people of the Gambia. And I think listening to what Doctor has just presented, I mean the 10 points agenda, I'm particularly interested in the agriculture sector. And I've been following Dr., I think some 1 month, 2 months back, I mean Dr. Sise. He was on a tour of Europe, specifically in Germany, and I've been following him through his Facebook page, visiting some industries, agro-industrial factories, and I was really impressed to see a presidential aspirant going around to look at some of those machinery that could probably help, or I will not say probably, will help a great deal in boosting the agricultural production of this country. And some of the labor-saving devices that he has also been looking at will also help to solve the drudgery affecting the main farmers, being women and youths in this country. So I think this may only be a summary of what you have. I can call this a manifesto, but I'm sure the details are there. You have some of our emails. If you can send us the detail or the details in our respective emails, it will be very important. Now a question, Doctor, and CA. You have some very lofty promises here. How would you go about mobilizing? Because without finance, it's difficult. This is just going to be a dream. Without finance, the human resources, the financial resources, how are you going to implement this lofty 10-point agenda? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gomez. I think that's a very good question. Even though it's very broad and generalized, I would have expected questions that go on specific sectors, but I also have given a broad answer. When it comes to the human resources, I think Gambia is blessed with with an expansive human resource. What we want to do is to ensure we make Gambia attractive to attract diaspora expertise. We have a lot of Gambians who are living in the diaspora in different fields, who are experts in their various fields. In fact, helping build other countries. Many years of experience, experts in their various sectors. We want to find a way to attract them to come back home and help in national development. Now, when it comes to the finances, like I said, it's not sustainable to borrow more money to pay for finance more debts. We are going to focus on money creation using different innovative models. One is investment, and two is savings. Like I said, today we need to look at, within the Gambia today, especially in the public service, where can we save money from? Like I said earlier on, duty waivers alone, or tax waivers alone are costing us $1.2 billion. Vehicle maintenance policy, if implemented, can give us over $300 million. We can have guidelines that can ensure that today we save in the public sector, because today 80% of our budget goes to feed a large government of 47,000 employees. How do we ensure that we streamline the civil service so it is more responsive? And also we outsource certain auxiliary services, like courier services, like the messengers, the drivers, and security to the private sector, where we can save some money as well. So it's our savings, electricity, the amount of money we are spending in government on electricity, because there are no guidelines in how we use utilities in terms of air conditioners. There are no guidelines. Fuel, there should be a threshold for how much fuel should be allocated. Government vehicles, there is a fleet of government vehicles that are not necessary. How do we auction off the surplus? How do we do an audit of all government vehicles and auction off the surplus so that we can also make money from that, but also streamline government vehicle allocation? Government travel, there should be a freeze on non-essential travel, and we save money on that. Also a freeze on non-essential hiring in the civil service. So the approach is to, in terms of broadly speaking, is savings, obviously, but also making, I also mentioned making the SOEs more responsive, but also more financially vibrant. Today, NAWEC has been insolvent, for example, since 2011. The amount of money we used to subsidize NAWEC, NAWEC is supposed to bring money. GAMTEL is overstaffed. 73% of those employed in the communication sector are employed by GAMTEL and GAMCEL. Only 12% by QCell, 9% by AfriCell, and then 6% by Comium. So how do we do to ensure these public enterprises are viable? What innovative, what structural reform do we have to do with the ports? The reason why Gambia was created, we all know it. The River Gambia. It is the reason, it is our reason of existence. When the colonialists came, they're not interested in anything but the River Gambia, how far it could be explored for trading purposes. We're not using even 5% of the potential of the River Gambia for river transportation purposes. All these things can bring money for us. So there is enough opportunities to create money internally. But we have to be smart. We have to make sacrifices. We have to make savings, but also invest in critical sectors like agriculture, the marine, in using public-private partnerships. There is enough private capital out there. Just looking for the right country with the right regulatory frameworks, the right economy for them to invest in it. So this is our focus in terms of money creation.
My name is Mr. Cham, Alkali Cham from Caravan News Network. Doctor, thank you so very much for that brilliant deliberations. To diversify the economy and growth, I believe one of the bad elements that one needs to get rid of is corruption. My question is, what mechanism will Citizen Alliance put in place to ensure that corruption is completely trimmed in this country? Thank you.
Like you said, corruption is very important that we fight. It is one of the biggest impediments to our national development today. We have 4 levels that we are looking at to fight corruption. One is institutional reforms. What institutions do we create, the new ones, or enhance existing ones to ensure transparency and accountability? Gambia lacks strong, efficient, empowered institutions, or what they call corruption watchdogs, to ensure not even the president is spared. Today we've had a series of corruption-related cases that are not investigated because of the people who are involved in it. So one is to build the right institutions, an anti-corruption commission empowered, well-staffed, and given full powers to investigate corruption-related issues. But also have what they call separate the Attorney General from the Minister of Justice. Because you cannot be advising government, you cannot be the Minister of Justice, yet supposed to hold government accountable into that sector. Apart from at the institutional level, we are also going to ensure we motivate staff. Why petty corruption takes place is because staff are not motivated, their salaries are poor. And we have a very highly cash-based society. Shifting away from a cash-based society to a more digital platforms where transactions, especially money transactions, are based digitally. For example, if I want to release my container from the port, I don't need to go with a bag of money to customs or to ports. I can go online, do all the transactions, click a link, takes me to the payment portal, I make the payment, I have my reference number, and go and clear my container. But because we live in a cash-based society, where there are incentives for people to play around with money, that leads to corruption. So you need to digitize the systems. You need to ensure that we train our civil servants, especially at the basic level, to make a difference between what is public money and what is private money. And today that is not happening today. People in the civil service have this cultural belief that nak foko take, ini soya city dameng, no, we need to change that. We need to change that mentality. We need to do what they call lifestyle audits. A customs officer with a salary of $10,000 or 15 cannot buy certain type of vehicles or build certain type of homes. So when we see that, we have to ensure that we do a lifestyle audit. You have to explain to us where you got that money from. So training is key, but also punitive measures. We cannot allow impunity anymore. People go scot-free when caught with corruption. So we need to make sure there are stringent legislative measures that anybody who's caught stealing public money, then you are punished with the direst punishment. These are the 4 levels. 1, institutional reforms to ensure we have strong institutions, resilient institutions that can ensure accountability and transparency, but also have a strong anti-corruption watchdog that holds people accountable. 2, training, changing the mindset, the culture. I've heard people say, Gambia needs system change. Yes, we need system change, but it has to go with mindset change. If you change the system and the mindsets are not changed, it's worthless. We need both system change, but also mindset change, so people who work in the civil service know they are civil servants. But they also must be motivated and given incentives. That is why we are saying we are going to build 100,000 homes for such kind of people, to incentivize them, so they can stay in the civil service and serve without being corrupt. But at the same time also, punitive measures, that nobody is a sacred cow, even the president. Where there are suspicion that the president has engaged in corrupt practices, he or she must face the law. So these are our 4 areas in terms of how we want to fight corruption.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you. Guys, I apologize. I kind of mixed up the agenda. We needed to have the subject expert specialists each give a brief statement before we get into the question and answer. I thought I wanted them to listen to the question and answer before they give a statement generally. But I received a superior argument, which I thought is better for them to give their statements. Then people can also draw from that to better construct or ask their questions. So we will do that now, and then we'll continue with the question and answer. So I will please call on Mr. Malmo. Sambu, can you join us over there? Please, Mr. William Jai. And of course, Mr. Nyang Jai. Please put your hands together for them.
The area I'm going to focus on is really going to be something to do about my background, which is in the business environment. Because I believe good governance and business go hand in hand, although we typically try to treat them independently. If you look at even our NDP, the way it's structured, there is no harmonization between creating a conducive business environment and good governance. So I'm going to probably not touch all 10 points, but I'll make an attempt to make a point that a conducive business environment will help will help develop the private sector. And by doing that, you will be able to achieve some of these 10 points. Because I too follow social media every so often, and when the initial 10 points were released, there were some cynical people out there saying this is not going to happen, it's never going to happen. So I'm going to start with item number 1, which is the economy. And something that's important that's in there is the word diversify. If you look at the way our economy, it's been pretty much the same. We've been doing tourism the same way. Leisure tourism is what we've been focused on as a country for a long time. It's now to try to really diversify just that particular product, expand that product to something else. So let's just take tourism, for instance, okay? Acronym MICE, meetings, I believe incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. It's a $1.2 trillion business worldwide. Why can't the Gambia tap into it? We have our tourism sector only operates within 6 months, if that much. Why can't we expand that and bring businesses over here to come do their conferences over here? Bring art exhibitors to bring their artwork here. We now have an infrastructure here with the International Conference Center. So it is definitely doable to diversify our economy, okay? That's just one item. Agro-processing, we're still doing farming. But what do we do after that? Are we processing it? Yes, we've started the journey, but we are way behind in trying to make sure that some of what we grow here can be processed. We're still importing tomato paste. We have fertile ground. Why can't we, okay, grow more tomatoes and make tomato paste? We don't need to be importing these things. So manufacturing, like light, we can start with light manufacturing to be able to diversify. These are just examples. I'm not coming up with solutions, by the way. Like I said, I'm not an expert, just making recommendations on some things. And to prove that some of these, everything here is really doable if we just focus and apply the right approaches. So something else that's here that's very important, really, that really drains our resources as a country, is our civil service, okay? We need to assess. Okay, I'm not a big fan of just coming there and saying there's a problem, let's just break it apart and fix it. We need to assess our civil service, okay? We need to make sure we right-size it, meaning we need to make sure that we have the right people in the right jobs, not have one person performing within a department, but then you're paying for 20 people. If it takes 4 people to perform the work, keep 4. The rest of them, you can retrain them, and I believe Dr. touched on this, you can retrain them and move them somewhere else. And there are areas that we need to tap in this country that we haven't. And let's take, for instance, how much of ICT do we do? Not much. He mentioned eGov, like you pay online and all that stuff. So the civil service that we need to retool we can train them to be the ones to help us turn our government into eGov. Okay? So again, these are approaches that could be looked at to see whether it will work. Our state-owned enterprises, some are doing a lot, very well. They're making money, okay? But we need to get the government away from competing with its citizens, with the private sector. It makes no sense to be doing this. We need to gradually figure out how to make sure we enter into public-private partnership with Gambian businesses who can gradually assign these loans, the role of running these state-owned enterprises. Of course, the government should always have a seat at the table to make sure that it looks out for the citizens of the country. But a public-private partnership is a way to really try to get the government out of competing with its business by really getting rid of some of these state-owned enterprises, okay? I'm not even going to talk about the corruption part because I believe there's no other solution. We need to get away from the cash basis. Okay, so point 2 is about creating jobs. And this is what gets me excited because, like I said, I play in the private sector. We need to understand that if we don't build the private sector, we're not going to create jobs. We have what we refer to, we have a problem right now. Okay, the missing middle is referred to as the missing middle. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of micro and small businesses. One-man show, or they probably have 1 or 2 staff, sometimes relatives working for them. We don't have medium-sized businesses that can really create jobs, be able to export some of these products or services that we create here. A government, or our government, whoever it is, need to make sure we work with the private sector. Be it making sure money is accessible and cheap. Okay, right now, taking a loan as a business is just cost prohibitive. You're not going to make any profit by doing that. Your business is going to continuously be paying interest, not even paying the loan back. So we need to be serious. That's the only way. The private sector is what's going to create these jobs. The government cannot continuously always be the major employer. We need to get away from that business. We need to refocus. We need to rethink our approach. The private sector needs to be developed. That way, the jobs could be created. And it is doable. In addition to that, we need to look at our salaries across the board, not just the civil service. Our salaries across the board. I believe Doctor mentioned decent jobs. It's not just the pay you take home. Our citizens deserve better than that. They deserve to have not just the salary, but the salary and benefits, because they have families to take care of. Okay, if you have 2 kids and a husband or wife, you want to make sure they have access to health care. Okay, we need to make sure they have access to fair payment schemes. We need to make sure that their jobs are secure. These things are easily doable, but the government needs to make sure, create a conducive business environment for the private sector to be able to create these jobs. 100,000 jobs is easily doable. If we were to be serious about just turning our government, e-gov, just turning our government, making sure we do a lot of stuff with, use ICT to provide some of our services. That by itself can create jobs. And we have a lot of untapped areas that we're not even looking at as a country. All these areas, if we're serious about it, will create jobs. Let's talk about exports. That missing middle, if we try to create it, if we create that conducive environment and make sure we create that missing middle, our government, our private sector will have not only the finances, they will have quality product that meets standards to be able to export their products outside the country. So all that is going to create jobs. It's important. Also, in addition to that, we need to make sure that the pool of employees can deliver. I heard that when the International Conference Center was being built, most of the laborers came from outside Gambia. That is sad to hear, because whatever it cost, $50 million that they said it cost, most of it is leaving the country, right? The Chinese brought theirs, and then even the laborers were from neighboring countries. We need to be serious about Tibet institutions. We need to make sure we enhance our Tibet system. We need to make sure we have standards such that our young will have the skills required to be able to enter the labor force and decent jobs and be able to keep them and stay in our country instead of trying to look for somewhere else. Any human being is always going to try look for something better at the risk of their lives. But if we create those environments here, make sure they have access to decent job, give them the skills that's required, guess what? It's motivation to stay in our country, okay? So let me move on so that I won't take too much. I'm going to address just a couple of other things. I think point 3 talked about infrastructure. Our infrastructure gap is huge. These are fixable. Our government shouldn't just have a public-private partnership legislature. We need to make sure that we implement it, okay? There was an initiative that was started by somebody called Africa Infrastructure Fund. It hasn't made any progress at all. Other countries have been doing it for years. It will raise billions of dollars without even touching our taxpayer money. This is to allow the private sector to participate with the government in a, like I said, public-private partnership to make sure our infrastructure gap is closed. The onus is in that private entity or the private entities to go and find the money. And the government obviously will be there to provide the oversight to make sure the citizens are not getting overcharged, that the citizens are getting the quality service. We cannot develop as a nation with a huge infrastructure deficit like we have today. It's not going to happen, be it healthcare, infrastructure, education, any of the social infrastructures. We need to make sure that we partner, any government to partner with the private sector in closing that infrastructure gap, okay? The last point I will want to talk about is how we attract investments. We know in previous governments that investors, local, international, will invest their money in a particular business, and then it gets taken over by the government, or it gets caught up in some legal battle that they never win, okay? Also, we've had a history of governments just, taking over people's property and land. We cannot continue to have that. We need to look at some of this legislation we have in place to make sure that intellectual property gets protected. Technology that gets into this country gets protected, okay? So that we don't try to own it. By doing these things, you are sending the signal to potential investors outside and in here to feel confident in investing in our country. Absent that, investors are not going to come, okay? They want to get their return on investment. We, as Gambians, we want to make sure we develop as a nation, create jobs and whatnot, and live dignified lives. We can make that partnership happen, but only if we reassure Gambians and foreigners that it is safe to invest your money. There is money in this country. Everywhere you turn, there's development. People are building. Last year, $600 million came into this country as in diaspora remittances. We can have diaspora fund. I think that's, Dr. Cisse mentioned that as well. To be able to even, solve some of the infrastructure challenges that we have. But again, you need to have the right legislature. You need to have the right oversight to make sure, and then you will then give the potential investors the confidence to really spend their money in the country. If we don't do that, investors are going to invest. The loans will never work, okay? Instead, what it does in the private sector is what we refer to as crowded out effect. The Gambia cannot invest in the private sector if it continues taking loans, because the Gambia will not have any money left to invest in the private sector, to invest in innovation or infrastructure to make sure that the private sector can strive. So, again, these are the areas that I have experienced it in. I'm not going to call myself an expert, but these things are doable, they're achievable, only if we employ the right strategies. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon. I am also a generalist. I'm a macroeconomist. So I don't specialize in one thing, but I tend to have a bird's eye view of the overall economy and see things from that perspective. I've seen all the points listed. And one thing that's critically missing here, as far as I'm concerned, is linkages to the sectors. These points, if they stand independent of each other, the impact in terms of policy and realization of its objectives will be limited. So what needs to happen, it needs to have a view whereby you see sectoral linkages. I'll give you one example, education and jobs. We know that in the Gambia, we have high incidence of unemployment, particularly with the youth. But that doesn't mean that there are no jobs in the Gambia. What it clearly means, the skill set available by Gambian youths is not in line with what the labor market demands. How can we change that? We change that by making sure that our educational system prepares the youth of this country for jobs. What are the jobs that this country is asking and seeking for? Plumbers, electricians, weldermen, mechanics, tilers, masoners, etc., etc. But unfortunately, you go to the University of the Gambia. They're graduating many development specialists, many lawyers, accountants, etc., etc., and that's not what the labor market of this country is looking for. And if you ask yourself the question once again of quality as it relates to education, once again, you have people, if you take the WASC results coming out, 80% of our students fail the basic math and English, and yet still our university systems are full. It's saying that quality is not adhered to. So you cannot have a labor market that's responsive if the policies are not synchronized. So from point 1 to point 10, there need to be sectoral linkages. And these sectoral linkages will help. Once again, another sectoral linkage is tourism and agriculture. He mentioned that we're having a lot of imports coming in vis-a-vis our productive base. Why is that our tourism sector is not being fed by the local economy? From meat, from milk, from juice, etc., etc. And these are areas that we need to work on. That's why we call for a harmonization whereby we have close sectoral linkages, especially in the real sectors of the economy. That is the primary observation I have so far. And I have few secondary observations that I want to point out. One, on the overall economy, I think revenue mobilization needs to change, the concept of revenue mobilization. In the Gambia, whenever we talk of revenue mobilization, we're thinking of taxes, taxes, taxes. Yes, taxation is good, but there is a component of the national budget that we haven't done a good job over the past 30 years to grow, and that's called non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue are creative means of collecting money. It can be toll roads, the Senegambia Bridge. it can be many things, but the government need to find a way to grow non-tax revenue and reduce tax revenues. If you grow non-tax revenue, it means you're trying to broaden the base of the economy. If you broaden the base of the economy, you will take off the pressure that is put on taxation. The reason Gambia, once again, happens to have a high incidence of an informal sector, most people want to operate below the net. Why are they operating below the net? Because it's an incentive not to be seen or known by the taxman. So the tax burden of this economy is shouldered by no less than 30% of the overall participants in the macroeconomic environment. And that is not something that's going to grow the Gambian economy, and that's not something that's going to create income distribution for parity. Because a lot of people are not known, a lot of people don't pay any form of taxes. Why? Because there is a reward not to. So that is one thing we need to try and change within the macro environment. So I'll just go on to a few points that I want to highlight that I think CA need to walk, because what you have so far on these points, I think they're noble. I think it can do a lot, but it needs stitching up in certain areas. We'll go to energy. I think we all talk about renewable energy, renewable energy. It's all well and good, but the capital expenditure to have renewable energy, I think, has been one of the biggest impediments. Because if you want a solar farm of just 10 megawatts, it's not the same as wanting a 10 megawatt generator. Why? The problem here is the amount of panels you need and the cost of getting these panels sometimes outweighs the need or use of just getting a fossil fuel machine. So in terms of energy, what we really need to see is policies to fragment NAWEC. Any government coming must push or pass on power generation to the private sector, 100%, meaning NAWEC completely gets out of generating power. Why? NAWEC is not good at generating power vis-a-vis the cost of production. So if government encourages IPPs, independent power production, NAWEC completely moves away from generating power, and NAWEC will now focus its energy where its competencies and advantages are. And what is that? Transmission. All the power lines in the country owned by one company called NAWEC. And NAWEC can allow 200 companies that want to get into independent power production to produce power. Then NAWEC will give each company a master meter at the end of their generating machines or their solar farms. Then they will pump this electricity onto the grid. Then once they do that, what NAWEC does next is handle the billing. NAWEC will send bills to all the households and businesses, collect money, and on an agreed time frame, be it 30 days, 15 days, 45 days, or 90, they will pay this independent power producer what they have passed on to the grid, that is the transmission and distribution line that is owned by NAWEC. And once that is done, we fight the corruption in NAWEC, because procurement of heavy fuel is why NAWEC is very inefficient in pricing per kilowatt hour you and I buy. So the first point of solving the electricity problem is to disaggregate NAWEC, and in the disaggregation, you give people who are competent in producing power to do what they do, and then you take away the intermediation that brings about the corruption in the procurement of what NAWEC does. And that savings can now be turned into a lower tariff as it relates to kilowatt hour of cash power, and that is what's going to spur the micro manufacturing we want in this country, because we cannot say that we want manufacturing when exorbitant kilowatt price of electricity is available. So it's a zero-sum game. Society cannot win under the current energy dispensation that we have, and if we are serious to change it, I think we need to be in to break NAWEC into pieces. And the only part of NAWEC that NAWEC will continue to shoulder as a social service is water. Why water? Because the cost of producing water is more than the revenue we collect out of water. Therefore, that is the reason why public enterprises are in place, to serve a need that private sector otherwise would not serve. And that's why in the early days, we had cable and wireless. It graduated into GAMTEL. But guess what? Times have come whereby private sector delivers services better than GAMTEL, and that's why we no longer need a GAMCEL as it relates to a public enterprise, and must be sold, not must be fixed. It must be sold. And why should it be sold? Let it be sold pennies to the dollars. If even we don't make money, we take away the burden of subsidizing a dog. Because in business, William Jai will tell you, we have stars and dogs. Stars are companies like the Gambia Petroleum Storage Company. That's a public enterprise worth having because it brings you socio-economic dividend that you can plow back for making your country better. GAMCEL has been feeding off of the public coffers, and they're not bringing in returns to consumer to really make up for what we give them. Then, on the issue of infrastructure, I think he made mention of the amounts of roads we have. And this is where sectoral linkages come back. We no longer in the Gambia have road tax. We have what you call a fuel levy. And the fuel levy, we are collecting multiples of what we used to collect in road tax, because the road tax was fixed per different category of cars: lorries, taxis, private vehicles. Now we are paying per liter. Every time you and I go to the pump and we buy fuel, it's about 50 bututs or $1 is taken out as fuel levy. So if you take this amount of monies at the end of the year, it's big sums of money. But in fiscal management, money is fungible. So if all these funds go into the consolidated fund, government uses it for other things that it should not use it for. And why am I saying this? We are getting into projects. We've seen the Banjul Rehabilitation Project. We have seen the Nyomi Hakalang Project. These are projects that are locally funded, and how they are funded? By us borrowing money. The first principle of public finance and public infrastructure finance is to make sure that projects that you want to do are self-liquidating, meaning if I spend 30 million to build a road, the road should be able to pay itself, not by toll, but maybe by opening up the business space for government to collect more taxes to justify that. Or government happens to have a line item that can pay for that. And the fuel levy is something that can pay for these things. But unfortunately, the way our fiscal management is done, everything goes into the consolidated fund, and most of the time, it doesn't go for the intended purpose. We have a serious traffic jam in the Gambia. Why? Our road networks from independence to date followed where the development is heading to, rather than looking for ways to open up the country. So imagine Nyangjai wanting to go to Brikama from Banjul, but he has to go through Westfield, or he has to go through Sting Corner, Senegambia, Airport Junction to Brikama. That needs to change, and the only way it can change is for us to be there to be different and use the river. Why the river? We are very blessed and fortunate that from Banjul all the way to Bintang, we can just be along the river, and at most, if we use it for mass transportation, it will not take you more than an hour to get to Bintang. What does that mean? From Wafinjago, if we happen to have a mass transit owned by, let's say, a GPTC or a private enterprise, you can leave Wafinjago. The first port will be Breckwald. So anyone going to Bakau, Joshuang, you can get out of Breckwald, and there'll be a car park right behind Breckwald where they call Ndangan, and it can take people beyond, from Joshuang to Bakau, you name it. The next one will be where the mobile traffic police is. There is a river behind there. It can take people, once again, from the Westfield area into Serekunda. The next one is from the Superbad, Ibo Town. The next one is Churchillstown, Talinding at the hospital, Abuko. From Abuko, you go further, Bafoloto. From Bafoloto, it takes you further and further all the way. So imagine a river transport for mass transit, just going along all the way. What will that do? It will free up our roads, because the problem we have congestion, and the problem we have a high incidence of maintenance is heavy usage of the roads. All the goods and services going up country uses the road, plus the ECOWAS corridor. So today we can change that by making sure we employ river transportation and free up our roads. And freeing up our roads means freeing up repairs and maintenance in terms of the frequency, and also addressing environmental issues of pollution. Why pollution? You go to the Westfield roundabout, you go to the Burusubi roundabout, you go to traffic light, Serekunda market, you have concentrated polluted areas because cars idle more than they should idle. So these are all environmental concerns, and the way of mitigating these concerns is to link these points that have been listed. All the points are noble, all the points are good, but what it lacks, as far as I'm concerned, is linking them together. And I think that's the next step. And once that is done, it can be brought back and sold to the public, and I think it will be a winner. Thank you so much.
So you see why Citizens Alliance is different? We don't just think we can do, we tap into experts and sound their minds. And I'm sure everything Nyan has said here, Dr. has taken on board. We've all listened, we've taken on board, and you will see the difference it's going to are once we go back and sit and re-walk on these 10-point plan. Thank you very much, Nyan. We're indeed grateful. I will now call on Mr. Malmo Sambo also to give a statement. Then we will go back to everybody to ask their questions, the audience.
All right, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. I'm very grateful for this invitation, and briefly I will just discuss 2 points. And the 2 points are climate resilience and agriculture, and as well environment in general, which talks about energy, forestry, flora and fauna, and so on. Now, as an independent person who works in this domain specifically, I think the 2 key important things, or what I often consider to be the universal set on which every other human activity is a subset of, is the environment. Now, the environment is where we do everything. If your environment is bad, your economy, your health, the drivers of your economy basically wouldn't be good enough. Simply because most of the natural resources and the well-being of our environment dictates the well-being of every other sector. So it is important that the CA has environment in 2 phases within the 10 points. Now, how do we interlink climate resilience and agriculture? Now, it is in this country, since independence or till date, we have people saying we have arable land, we have fertile land, but no single person could actually defend this with an academic paper. But basically we know, oh, we have fertile land, but how do we get to know this? But is it in this country that every year we are giving fertilizers to farmers to put on this soil, without even considering if these soils definitely need this NPK that we are giving farmers to really apply? So there is a gap between policy and research. And for a progressive nation, all your development agendas and policies that you're developing should be dictated by empirical evidence from scientific investigations, which is very much lacking in this country. We sit at the comfort of our offices based on opinion and what we think. We develop policies on those bases, and that is why they are not reflective of the realities of the common man in the Gambia. Now, for climate resilience to be anything promising for this country that could definitely help our agricultural sector, we need to ensure that there is serious research in that sector. That we don't just give farmers fertilizer to apply on the sun simply for political reasons, but we actually undergo serious scientific investigation that dictate those actions. For agriculture has a way to lead to climate change, and as well climate change would come back to affect the agricultural sector, and which is more or less the major employer in this country, and that is where our food basket is depending on. But now we are more or less depending on food coming from outside because our food basket is dwindling. How do we solve this problem? Becomes the bigger question. Now, we can solve this by engaging in research that dictates policy and action. And until that is done, we'll be taking action based on opinions that will not solve the common man's problem. And climate change comes in different phases. It affects basically the major drivers of our economy: the health sector, the fisheries sector, the water resources sector, as well the agricultural sector. And if you remove these sectors in our economy, what are we left with? So to bridge the gap, a responsible government needs to ensure that there is serious focus on research to dictate actions. And through empirical research that gives you good results to dictate your development agendas, then we are able to move forward. Now, on environment generally, like I said, this is basically the universal set on which every other thing is dependent on. Now, if you look at the demographic characteristics of this country, where the population is increasing exponentially, we expect that growth will occur as we get on. Of course, there will be more waste generated. And it is in this country, if you talk about the urban Gambia, we do not have any waste management system. Dump sites in real waste management terminologies basically does not exist in any way regarded as management. It's just a way of discarding. And then this is leading to groundwater pollution. And this is what exists in this country. And as well, we know our population is increasing. And of course, businesses and real estate developments are actually prolified. And what is going to happen? More waste will be generated. Are we ready to really solve this crisis? Now, one of the ways to solve this is basically having a landfill. Now, currently, we're working on some projects to ensure there is a landfill. But even identifying a site in terms of what characterizes a landfill, we cannot have. So whatever we do in this country should be dictated by empirical evidences that exist from research. So I'm trying to focus my points on how to link research to development agendas, and not just from thoughts and beliefs of people that this would work and then let's make it work. Now, another thing would be if you look at the coastline, from the Bunyadu Point all the way to Halahin River in Katong, when we talk about sea level rise, it's fast eating up the coast of the Gambia. And if you know the history of the tourism in this country, it used to be a triple S destination. Sun, sea, and the sun, that characterizes this country. And if you've been to more advanced countries with high tourism levels, you would understand that our destination, as per what really attracts tourists to this country, is very little. But how do we make this sector sustainable if we are actually cutting down our existing ecologies or ecosystems to really build hotels? Tourists don't come to this country because of beautiful buildings. So until we have research guiding some of those development agendas or actions that we take in terms of infrastructural development and other things, then we'll be able to know how to shape this country better. Otherwise, whatever we'll be doing will definitely be backfiring here and there. Now, another in that sector will be clean energy. I took time to listen to Mr. Njai, and of course, what he made mention of NAWEC is the common reality that almost every one of us know. Now, investment in heavy fuel, and as well lubricants and generators is not sustainable. NAWEC is spending a hell lot of money in actually ensuring that they give people electricity, but it's not really enough for the people. Now, the renewable energy sector, basically, if we are going into something like that, is just a single-time investment, which requires a lot of money, but as well the durability here we put into question. How long would it take you to maintain a well-done renewable energy plant than having generators that you need to apply lubricants, and generator 10 need to be made or need to be fixed or need a technician to work on? Now, we have a sample renewable energy technology that we are operating somewhere. And then we are sending into the NAWEC grid, and we can always recover our electricity from there. Now, what happened is that the power we are generating and sending to the grid could definitely supply the neighboring community where we are existing. Now, this sample was to show that in the Gambia, if you look at the NASA statistics, or in sub-Saharan Africa, the radiation that is hitting the ground, if it is 100%, 70% is remaining. And in Europe, the radiation out of 100%, only 10% is remaining. And that is able to power most part of Europe. Now, if 10% is able to power most part of Europe, we have 70% in sub-Saharan Africa, then renewable energy technology through solar is nothing we can say that we don't really have the enough capacity and resources to really get into renewable energy. It's more sustainable, it's more pragmatic, and really is more results-oriented. Because you cannot talk about economic development when you actually don't even have basic electricity to really run your projects. And I think that is really very important. And when we talk about the flora and fauna, it's very interesting in this country that we ban timber logging in principle, but we are one of the biggest exporters of timber in the sub-region. Quite ironic. So if we are to be honest to ourselves, what we need to do is basically to ensure that policies are implementable, and they are not just donor-driven to actually satisfy the donors. And most of those documents are Bumstead documents in a sense that they are not satisfying the common man's need in this country. And documents cannot be developed in that way. So for me, basically, to sum it up, I think research is of great importance in the development of any economy. And then to really build up that linkage among all of this, it's important that we get into research to know the exact problem so as to be able to foster solutions to those problems. And it is in this country that you don't see government trying to develop a policy and they get into researchers to say, could you find out if this is a problem in this country? So development must actually be driven by research, and of course, all those things should be guided by empirical evidences. Thank you very much.
Yen mi fi nekk yen mi ñuy déglu ñi taxaw fi wax yépp doomi Gambia lañ indi wuñ fi consultant o jóge wuñ fi benn kenn bitim réew mu ñëw di ñu waxal loo xam ne moo lëmba réew mi o moo ñu moo mooy ñaax doomi réew mi Gambian lañ seen xam-xam ñu ngi toog biir Gambia di ko fi def so pour man loolu dafa am lu bëgg lu mu yokk ci man war naa woon ñépp ne Gambia am nañ talent Gambia am na luñ am buñ leen doolelee génnee leen teg lañ fi ñu war a teg Gambia dina jëm kanam Gambia fi mu nekk ñun ñoo ko fa taaj de waaye ñi ko defar am nañ leen te foo naa ñii taxaw fii wax muy William Njie muy Ñaan Njie muy Mr Malmo Sambu wane nañ tey ne doomi Gambien am nañ xam-xam am nañ pas-pas bi te pare na ñëw liggéey seen réew buñ leen doolelee buñ leen jàppalee buñ leen tegee place so loolu la Citizens Alliance commencé di def bokkuñ Citizens Alliance waaye because of dañ bugg a seen réew moo tax ñu fiil ne comme que yaa ngi yéen a ngi dox ci loo xam ne dafa war a yóbbu réew bi kanam am nañ suñ xam-xam nàcc na ci fànn boobu noonu dinañ ñëw bokkaay yéen jox ci suñ tuuti xam-xam pour dëgëral li ngeen di def pour dimbale dëkk bi dimbale doomi Gambia kon Malmo William Njie Ñaan Njie ngàcce ngaalaama doomi Gambia nii laa def doomi réew mi baax nii laa def jërë ngeen jëf pour dooleel loolu rek wan leen ne Citizens Alliance ñun ci lu ñuy yëngu pour yëfi yóbbu réew mi kanam la du yëfi ay parparlu du yëfi ay ŋaañante du yëfi ay saagante du yëfi tuuti wante waaye liy yóbbu Gambia kanam pour dimbale doomi Gambia si suñ biir ñu ngi fi am docteur Ibrahima Diagne partem la am APP waaye taxut ku bugg a réew bu la sa beneen doomi réew ooyee ci loo xam ne dafaa yóbbu Gambia kanam foog naa war nga cee sawar pour ñëw taxaw déglu am loo ci yokka dimbale borom dooleel ko di la wax jërëjëf si sa taxawaay ñu am fii nii Binta Jammeh député mayor KMC moom it mu ngi fii nii doomi UDP la waaye taxut ñëw na tey fii nii pour ñëw fekkee li nii ànd ak ñun si li ñooy def pour wane ne doomi Gambia la moom it jëm kanami Gambia moo ko ñor thank you very much we appreciate your presence here Sadio Camara mu ngi liggéey Action Aid ñu ci bari dañuy wane oh ñun bokkuñ politics ñun we are not supposed to be in politics you know this is not you don't have to be partisan but I think every single individual every Gambian every patriotic person of any country should be political. So we don't make that misunderstanding or mistake. Everybody needs to be political because it determines what you eat, the roads, the schools, the house you live, the cost of living. It determines it. So everybody needs to be political, but you don't have to be partisan. So Action Aid it's supposed to be a non-governmental or non-political organization, but xam nañ yóbbu réew kanam naka la mel te bëgg nañ cee bokk ci loolu la ñuy dox waaye taxul biñ ko ooyee teew na fii nii pour fekkee lii nii pour déglu li ñuy wax su ci amee lum ci yokkari yokk ko soo ñu ngi koo jaajëfal di ko wax jërëjëf ci teewaayam fii nii keneen nit ku ma bëgg a recognize mooy Mr Madi Jobaate ñun ñëpp xam nañ ko every time ñu ne Madi APRC la NPP la UDP la CA la doy la waaye lu baax la parce que fu kaadoom war a dem rek dina ko fay dugal so kenn mënu koo align ne ko lii nga xam nga boo ko defee rek yaa ngee parparlu waaye bu nit ñi saa yu nekk di wax ne lii la which means ne yow ci lépp ngay wax time bu nga war a wax ak nu nga ko war a waxee te moom it ci li mooy dox léngu ci organisation bu ma doy du yëfi politique waaye doomi Gambian la te anything loo xam ne dafay yóbbu Gambia kanam dañ koy gis muy cee dox muy cee yëngu te muy cee jublu te daf see try pour jiitu so ñu ngi wax Madi Jobaate jërëjëf ci taxawaayam fii nii ñu ngi koo rafetlu.
My name's Mohamed Lamin Cisse, a student in the University of the Gambia and a first-year student pursuing a bachelor's degree in political science. And I will first start to acknowledge the importance and feasibility of each of the CA 10-point promises. But I would like to put my focus on the second promise, and that is jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. This has been the cry of every citizen, almost 60% of the country's population. Anybody you ask out there about the problems of this country, he or she will tell you there is no jobs in this country. Ligay amut si deka bi, doku wuta ñi banko kam. It's all they tell you. And saying they will create 100,000 jobs in the first 5 years when the CA government is entrusted with the responsibilities to deal with the affairs of this country. My point is, saying progressively to impose minimum wages, I think is the most important when it comes to job creations. Because having a job and not having a salary that can provide your livelihood and the livelihood of your family is very frustrating and unfortunate. So my question is, how can a CA government, if entrusted with the responsibilities to run the affairs of the state, progressively impose minimum wages to its citizenry? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cisse. You are indeed a worthy student of political science at the University of the Gambia. And I understand also that you are mostly interested in jobs because very soon you will graduate, and when you graduate, you want to get a job. We are promising to create 100,000 jobs within our first 5 years. Now, currently, the unemployment rate of this country is at 35%. Youth unemployment is 41.5%. Out of our 2.5 million population, 1.3 are already in the labor force. And 60,000 are ready to enter the labor force every year. But the jobs that are being created, like Mr. Nyangdai has said, it's not matching as to what is available. 100,000 jobs is nothing for the first 5 years. As we speak, before I just tell you how we are going to do it, we are creating hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs around the world from here in the Gambia. Why? I mentioned that almost 90% of what we eat, consume, comes from outside. It's people who make them. Look at our houses. When we build houses I'm not having the right statistics, but a huge chunk of the materials we use to build our houses are made outside. The electrical appliances, the plumbing appliances, the tiles, the paints, the corrugate, all these are made outside of the Gambia. Who are making them? People, other young people, other countries. So if we're able to have a productive base to make the things that we need here, we provide jobs. But I'll just focus on 3 sectors in terms of job creation. One is agriculture, 2 is tourism, which is also within the services sector. We are able to attract, as we speak, on average 200,000 tourists every year. With little innovation in the tourism sector, introducing like what Mr. Williams said, conference tourism. Imagine transforming Bonto or Bintang into what they call conference island, with state-of-the-art conference facilities to attract World WHO, IMF, all these international organizations to come and do their conferences there. Bird watching, recreation to sports tourism, renovate our existing cultural sites like Jufre and the others, engage in other medical tourism. We're able to bring in 1 million tourists every year. Kerr, which is an island off the coast of West Africa, in the past 7-8 years, they were able to attract only 176,000 tourists every year. With some innovation, now they bring in 800,000 tourists in Kerr. Morocco was behind. Now they bring in 10 million tourists every year. Imagine with some innovation, we'll bring 1 million tourists on average into this country every year. And for every 10 tourists that comes, 1 job is created. 100,000, 1 million tourists means how many jobs? 100,000 jobs in the tourism sector and its value chain. What is the problem? Seasonality. Agriculture is seasonal, only the rainy season. But the whole agro industry has the potential to bring in jobs in the hundreds of thousands if it's not seasonal. If we focus on regional specialization, creating agricultural belts where we focus on specialization. What is Fonyi good at in terms of production? What is CRR good at? What is Basse good at? What is West Coast good at? Not only producing, and also move away from peanuts. When the colonialists, before they left, they did what they call division of labor. They looked at small Gambia and said, you guys are only good at producing peanuts. That's not true, that's false. We can produce better than peanuts. We have to diversify our agricultural base, focus on fruits and vegetables, focus on flowers, what's called floriculture. Today, Kenya is one of the biggest exporters of flower to Europe. And when I'm flower, not foreign, but the flower. If we focus on floriculture, fruit and veg, and then also have variety of seed varieties with light manufacturing, that has the potential to create jobs, but also create the right enabling environment to attract global investors. Gambia, Mr. William Nyangdai said, geo-proximity. When the colonialists came, they were not interested in Senegal. That is why the French came later to take Senegal. The river Gambia, they were only interested in terms of trading purposes. When the Americans came, where did they build a base? Yundum International Airport. You look at today Djibouti, which is almost equal the same size as Gambia, is doing well in the maritime industry, having bunkers in their capital, transforming that whole area into one of the biggest seaports, as a marine hub, supplying the entire world. If we do the same thing for the Gambia here, we can do better in terms of creating, but also the service sector, the tech. We have young people here who are back-end coders. Create the right digital infrastructure. They'll be sitting in Katong, in Brikama, in Gunjur, providing services for Google and Amazon outside of this country. But when you create the right environment as well, the right regulatory frameworks, the right knowledge economy, the right citizen, what will stop Amazon from building a distribution center in Gambia, employing 5,000 young people because of geo-proximity? What will stop Tesla from building factories in Gambia that make semiconductors and batteries for their electric cars? Because why? Maybe it's cheaper here to make. That's what they call global production chains. That is what is happening now. This mobile phone you see, or this laptop, is not made only in China. They make parts in different parts of different, depending on any country's comparative advantage. So the opportunities are there, not only in the productive sectors, in the service sector, tourism, in the agro-industry. Once we move away from the tourism sector, today the tourism sector is underperforming. Seasonal, only 3, 4, 5 months. But also it is based on what they call, how do you call it again? This, when you buy everything before you come, what's it called? All-inclusive. It's bad for our tourism sector. The tourist buys everything, even water, before they come to the Gambia. That needs to change. Make sure it is round-the-year tourism. Create new products. One more mention, it's only the 3 S's, sun, sea, and sun. We can do beyond that. We can focus on what we can build artificial game parks in this country. Before the British tourist goes to Kenya, They can stop in Banjul, which is only 5 hours away. We have pleasant climate, nice food, nice people. So the opportunities are there, the potentials are, but just new thinking, some innovation. We can provide hundreds of thousands of jobs in the tourism sector and its value chain, in the agro-industry and its value chain, in the service sector, but also in other many sectors in terms of light manufacturing. And we need to align education as well. Today, UTG is producing hundreds of economists, hundreds of lawyers, hundreds of accountants, but the labor market doesn't need that. I was speaking to one contractor near my home. He's building a house. He said, I'm having problems. I cannot get masons. I said, why? He said, and they are paid $600 a day. You do 10 days, that's how much? $6,000. 20 days, 12, you do 30 days of mason, you get $18,000. Who gets that? When 4% of our workers only get above $10,000. We don't have masons, we don't have plumbers, we don't have electricians. So we need to change the education sector, like the linkage is there. You cannot get jobs right if you don't get education sector right. And these are the linkages that Mr. Njai is talking about. Thank you.
Good afternoon to you all. My name is Mamadou Diallo, a representative of ANR, the Alliance for National Reorientation and Development, headed by General Lamin Setubojan. I think I am very much grateful for the invitation sent to our party to come and grace this important event. And I think I'm very, very happy with Dr. Cisse's presentation in terms of your 10 points. And really, this is what Gambia needs at this point in time. We need to tell the Gambian people what do we have for them. And CA is a government in waiting. They should be approached and they should be treated as a government in waiting. So this approach is highly welcome and we really appreciate it. And I also have to be very grateful and thankful to your experts. I think I have written some other concerns or questions that I have, but I can see that your expert has elaborated some of those key areas. But I would still like to ask more questions and contribute. Dr. Cisse, you know that right now, to have a good government institution here, that is to say that to have a strong consolidated government institution that are supported by strong institutions, I want to understand how would CA go about with enhancing a strong government institutions that is going to be supported, not only because we have a Gambia whereby everybody is depending on the executive. So that is another part that I really wanted to answer. The other part also, I think, Nyanja, you are going out, but I have a question for you. Nyanja, you made mention about the transport system, and then you made about river transport system. And I think you really give a good analysis of how would that river transport support the Gambian transport system. But I also want to understand, if you could also help us to understand, if Gambia can also have a system, that is what we call the Uber system, whereby everything will have a GPS system or railway system. How do you think a railway system will be also supported in terms of our transportation system and also the airway? Because we are talking about investors, we are talking about partnership with the outside world. But are we having the better air base whereby people or investors can come in through the sea or through the air? Because I find it very difficult sometimes. I was going to South Africa. I use Sky Airline. I take almost 18 hours before I reach to Johannesburg. That was a long journey. Easy. So what do we have in place so that at least our air base is favorable for investors in this country? That is for Nyanjai, if I'm ready. The other thing also, I think I supported what Malmo has made mention. It is you made mention about your education system. You said inclusive, equitable, quality, and reform education system. That was very good. But it is also very important that we involve the vocational training and then supported by research. In this country, Malmo made mention of that because most of the time we are very good in designing, but it's never been supported by research.
And research is very, very important. So I want to understand how would CA, empower research in this country. The other thing also I have is the natural resources that Gambia have. I don't know whether CA has done any studies to understand that. Gambia is blessed with a lot of resources that we have. An example is the sand mining, the gravel mining, the alminite that is recently identified by some companies and they are mining in this country. Are we really looking at these things seriously to understand what are the natural resources Gambia have and what is, Gambia should benefit out of those resources? Because sand mining, gravel mining, and the alminite, because there were certain companies that started mining this country, and then Gambia have not benefited anything out of that. The other point also is about the fishery sectors, which is very neglected by many of these government waiting here. That is, I didn't see any part where you mentioned of the agriculture, that is to say climate resilience, enhance productivity, and achieve food security. Yes, but if you look at the fishery sector, we have different species of fish in our river. Do you have a look at that fish species? And then look at the storage. You made mention about the Chinese coming here and fishing. And they're taking all our fishing, good fish, outside this country. Our Gambian people are left, even bongo now is very difficult to have in this country. And it's very expensive. So what do CA have in terms of, mechanizing this fishery sector? Because this fishery sector alone is a huge sector that can boost your economy. You talk about taxation and different other areas, but this fishery sector alone, if any government in waiting, spend a lot of resources and time and energy and research over this sector, will really boost their economy. Thank you very much.
I think we start with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jallo, for that elaborate observation that you've made. And on the issue of transportation, particularly air transport, I am saddened to tell this gathering that 2 years ago, Mr. William Jai will bear me witness, I was invited by the CEO of Thurgood Marshall Baltimore Washington International Airport. I spent 2 days there, and all he wanted was that his airport didn't have a footprint of West Africa as a departure or a landing site. All the business from West Africa was either going to Reagan International, Dulles, or JFK as it relates to the proximity in the southeast corridor of the United States. So I went back on a second mission, and I took along the Civil Aviation Authority and members of the Ministry of Works. We, as a nation, would have received concessions from the airport authority to use that airport, and if we've done so, we would have also expanded our horizon within West Africa, i.e. Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and beyond, to pick up passengers, bring them to Gambia for a final destination to Washington, D.C. by way of Baltimore. But unfortunately, it failed. Why? The need, the necessity, and the urgency of government wasn't there. Now, Air Senegal has taken up where we left off. And ideally, they would have preferred Gambia over Senegal. And you always tell people, but Gambia and Senegal are so close. But in terms of aviation, where we are situated is still different in terms of airport when they were at Yoff. I'm not even talking about the new airport, which is more inland. Yoff and Banjul Airport is only 111 miles, but in terms of aviation, our location was more geographically strategic than any other location on the west coast of Africa. But unfortunately, as a nation, we are yet to maximize or monetize this God-given thing that we have. Now, on the issue of transportation that you've raised before I leave, you look at the Banjul International Airport. We have done three things to ourselves. It's like holding a pistol and shooting yourself on the foot. Why have I said that? Banjul International Airport has more restrictions for people flying out. Why? I have to pay for a COVID test. If I go to Senegal Airport, I don't have to do all that. In terms of restrictions or prohibitive restrictions, security fees, you don't have to do that in Senegal. So what have we done to ourselves? And Mr. Sambu made mention of studies. Today, every 1,000 Gambians that come to Gambia on vacation, you can safely say that 300 will terminate their flight in Senegal and find a way to Gambia. And we call that leakage. Our transport statistic, arrivals in the Gambia, we're having serious leakages. It means that people are terminating their travel in Senegal, and our Civil Aviation Authority is not benefiting from this. That's number one. Number two, the competitive nature of the Senegalese airport makes ticketing cheaper in Senegal. If I want to fly to Brussels and I buy a ticket here, it may cost me $58,000. I just drive next door to Senegal, buy a ticket to Brussels, it costs me about $41,000. The difference is the prohibitive taxes we put on it. And what does that do? It reduces our outflow and inflow of air traffic. Therefore, the Gambian airport, whether we like it or not, very soon it will be like the Ziguinchor airport or the airport in St. Louis. Why? Because Gambians will most likely be using the new airport at Jas as their international outbound airport. Why? It's because policy hasn't been responsive to make Yundum Airport a viable international airport. An airport that only happens to have 2 or 3 flag carriers, SN Brussels, Turkish Air, and Air Morocco. Whilst in Senegal, you have a minimum of 18 to 20 international flag carriers using it on a daily basis. So because of volume, prices are relatively good. Because of the new airport where it's situated, it makes it attractive for Gambians to use. So our Civil Aviation Authority are not aware that the practices we have at our airport today is making our airport redundant vis-a-vis international traffic, and pretty soon it will just be a small hub that will service A-Sky and others doing the sub-region. And if you look at the investments the government of the Gambia has put in that place, there is no way we're going to recoup it. And the reason why we're not recouping, airports are not meant for profits. Airports are meant to open up the economic space. And it's in the economic space that governments and countries make money out of. But unfortunately, these people see our airport as a cow that needs to be milked. And the more they milk it, pretty soon that cow is going to be feeble, and that cow will no longer serve a need and a use for society. Thank you so much.
Agadadi.
Mbijano aganyadi.
Albaka.
Mbaka important.
Yo, nga transfer la sto.
Ya transfer la sto.
Ha, code nyenje.
Okay. Important. Nsila ID soto.
Ah, sa soto. Sorry. Agadadi.
Mbijano bro.
Albaka.
Mbaka.
Bara alla service o tariaka.
Ah,
mbale ki janna nun kunu bara tariaka.
Ah, janno mi wana forest de bureau. Gambia tonkon na no mbali ya bere. Ah. Birim koyna fo kato
barisi kodo kino kato ni fo bolon blabe
56 branches mola soto Gambia ja
ha
Gambia kono ani Gambia bantala bankol nko kodo kiya bele kodo sifa fo falindiro fo nyaadi lafta memmen na kodi topoto ni kodi maraw Jannom number 1 ti nyonta andum fana nata another enterprise sotale wolam nyindi ko domorol fana kol fana be firale le dadi ma ni domorol ni fana beteata Gambia dawda yalo ngam fa kendol sotale je
wo moyo diat
apelenta
ni wo ka ni na lafta nyelen kendol e bina
yalo bu kanyi la ko la baraka ba
yalo ndel ciosano lo
baraka.
We live in a day and age where technology is creating a world without borders, filled with unlimited potential to improve the lives of the people around us. Innovarex Global Health ushers in a new way of leveling the playing field with increased access to quality healthcare services delivered at your doorstep. Our qualified professionals are equipped with state-of-the-art point-of-care testing technology to conduct tests such as kidney function, liver function, electrolyte tests, body composition, hemoglobin, A1C, and many more services with the highest efficiency in delivering results. The addition to our flagship Wellness on Wheels, more fondly known as WOW Delivery Service, brings the entire clinical experience full circle. IGH has remained committed to creating the future of healthcare delivery. Gone are the days of sending loved ones outside the country for basic medical services. Innovarex Global Health offers a new peace of mind and takes pride in delivering the quality of care we all deserve.